Next up, we head to Lebanon, a country that just can't seem to catch a break. A deep political and economic crisis with no real way out. Lebanon has fallen out of the headlines of late, but it is in need of international attention probably now more than ever. A little earlier, I caught up with Monocle's contributor in Beirut, Leila Molana-Allen, and I began by asking her to tell us about the situation on the ground in the Lebanese capital.
The situation in the country is dire. I've just returned from a few days in Istanbul looking for essential medicines for people, cancer medicines, hypertension medicines, because you can no longer get drugs in this country. The pharmacies are empty and people are dying. And being away for a few days, you come back and you really see in stark contrast just how bad the situation is. Things that you've got used to, things that human beings shouldn't be able to cope with. There is no power. If you're lucky, you get an hour of government electricity a day. The people who can afford it are running on these private generators which belch out toxic fumes but are also incredibly expensive. People are paying the equivalent of their monthly rent to have these generators, which, because there isn't enough diesel in the country, only supply 8 or 9 hours of electricity a day maximum in boiling hot temperatures. That also means the fridges don't work, so people can't keep their food cold. Everyone is getting food poisoning as a result. And of course, as I said, there aren't the medicines to cure that. There's no petrol for the cars, so people can't get anywhere. But also that means we're starting to see food shortages because they can't transport the wheat to make the bread. So we're seeing bread lines. They also can't transport bottled water. And in this country, you can't drink the tap water. It's toxic. So we're now starting to see shortages of drinking water as well. Incredibly dangerous. So almost everything running out. The latest problem is that because there's no diesel as well, they can't run the water pumps. So we're also seeing rationing of tap water. And now the internet is starting to go out because diesel runs the power stations. And once the national power provider goes, that means first the Wi-Fi goes, and now it's starting to affect 4G as well. So internet connection cutting out, phone lines cutting out, people in remote parts of the country who are without water and power now being cut off from communications as well.
It is such a desperate situation, as you described there. Tell us a little bit about what the government is trying to do to ameliorate some of the desperation you talked about there. There are also ongoing concerns about the stability of the government itself, aren't there?
The government is doing nothing. We don't have a government in this country at the moment. So there's been no government in Lebanon for over a year now, since the previous prime minister resigned after the Beirut explosion. There was then another prime minister who was nominated and tried for 10 months to form a government. That, of course, was Saad Hariri, who had been in power several times before and had originally resigned 2 years before when the protests were happening in this country. He came back after the explosion and said, I will come back and save the day. 10 months later, couldn't form a cabinet because of so much political infighting in the country as things collapsed around the parliament. Finally, he resigned. Another prime minister, still not a new one, again, somebody who had served before, Najib Mikati, was brought in a few weeks ago. He said he was going to do everything he could to put together a cabinet quickly, but he didn't have a magic wand. And once again, we've seen nothing. Week to week, he meets with the president, Michel Aoun. They say, oh, we're trying, things are happening. Nothing happens. There's still no government in this country. And the problem is, what's difficult to explain to people in other countries is these people, these prime ministers, are not being nominated because of the skills they have, because of the ideas they have on how to fix things. They are being nominated because they are the least difficult in terms of pleasing all these different groups within the parliament so everybody will agree to have them. They don't actually have ideas on the problems and how they're going to fix anything. So while international leaders say, oh, we need a government, come on, you must hurry and get another government together to help the country, there's absolutely no sign that when that does happen, if it does, they will have any policies to reverse any of the problems that they have overseen developing over the last few years.
International leaders, as you alluded to there, have tried to put some pressure for the government to get its act together. Is there anything more that the international community and countries, for example, like France, of course, that's particularly involved, can do to help?
So we have seen, yes, France very involved, the United States very involved. One of the problems, as I just mentioned, is that if they cooperate with the government, firstly, many Lebanese feel that the money is going to be stolen because they accuse all these politicians of mass corruption. And we've seen very difficult issues like the IMF offering this emergency fund for desperate families in poverty in Lebanon. If that goes through the government says that they're going to charge a different conversion rate from the black market conversion rate. The reality of that is that the dollars come into the country and only 50% of that goes to those families. Now, that was finally overturned, but with each issue like this, people in Lebanon are worried that if it goes through the government, there will be corruption once again and that aid money will disappear. So that's a problem in itself. On the other hand, what do? Do you say the government, such as it is illegitimate and you're going to refuse to work with it? That's a huge political statement. That's almost a declaration of war against the government. So it's very difficult for international partners to decide what they're going to do. At the moment, a lot of stuff is being run through the UN and through NGOs trying to get directly to partners on the ground, because this is now a crisis situation. It's no longer trying to prop up the government and help with development in the country. It's literally getting food and water and essential medicines to families, making sure they have shelter, finding ways to get around it when sewage pumps into their areas because the sewage pumps don't work anymore, so things are flooding, making sure they have access to water in the boiling heat. This is a crisis situation. So NGOs and international organizations can help with that while helped by the government, but for the longer term issues, it's extremely difficult to actually find a way forward. Now, some US senators just arrived in Lebanon a couple of days ago saying they're going to try and discuss with the government a way to improve the situation. Again, no hard ideas have come out of that so far, because really, what are they likely to do, these politicians, when they've done nothing over the last few years? There are no new ideas and the situation is just getting worse and worse.
That was Monocle's contributor in Beirut, Leila Molana-Allen, speaking to me a little earlier. You are listening to The Briefing on Monocle 24.